Welcome to Work from the Inside Out, a podcast that highlights real-life stories, practical strategies, and best practices for transitioning your career from unhappiness and dissatisfaction to fulfillment, meaning, and joy. Now here is your host, career and executive coach, Tammy Guler-Loeb.
Hey everybody, I am so pleased to introduce my guest today, Norman Wolfe. Norman is the founder and CEO of Quantum Leaders. He is a leading voice in bringing about a transformation of the core paradigm of business. Norman is a 15-year veteran of Hewlett Packard. He has led companies large and small and been a public company director and has over 30 years of consulting and mentoring leaders in a wide range of industries. He is the author of The Living Organization, an application of the core principles of how the world works to how organizations and individuals can create extraordinary impact. Please join me in welcoming Norman Wolfe. Hey, Norman.
Hey, Tammy. Thank you for having me. It's such a pleasure to be here.
Well, thank you for being here. So, Norman, you know that this podcast, Work from the Inside Out, is all about how we find our way through our lifetime, through our careers, from a variety of vocations and pathways to seeking more meaning, fulfillment, and satisfaction in our careers. And I know that you have had a fascinating journey. Take us back to the early years.
When I think about my career and how I got to this place in my life, I'd like to think, and back then I did think, that it would be sort of a straight line trajectory. You know, I set my goals and I'd go that way. But in reality, it really wasn't. It was a lot of zigzagging and ups and downs, and ended up in areas I never would have guessed I would be in. So I guess my career planning phase of my life started probably when I was 13 years old. As a Bar Mitzvah present, one of my uncles had given me his wings. He was a colonel in the Air Force.
Oh.
Out of all the gifts I was given, that to me was the most precious.
How come?
Because it represented a dream I had of being a pilot.
Oh.
So I set my goal to actually become a pilot. That led me to attend Brooklyn Technical High School, which is a special high school in New York, one of three key high schools you have to take a test to get in, which I was fortunate to pass. And I enrolled in the aeronautical engineering program of that high school. It was a combination of a technician school and a college prep school. So I got a lot of hands-on experience doing riveting and making molds and drafting and all the things a aeronautical technician would have to do. Because as a pilot, I would have that fundamental knowledge. I set my goal to attend the Air Force Academy. Well, it turned out I had some poor eyesight, so I couldn't attend the Air Force Academy. Well, I could, but I couldn't be a pilot. I could be a navigator or, some other profession within the Air Force. So I continued on, and I figured, okay, if I couldn't fly them, I'd design them. So I set my goal to become an aircraft designer, an aeronautical engineer. As I was ready to graduate high school, I happened to also be part of the high school fencing team. And so I was given the opportunity to attend New York University on a fencing scholarship. Now,
oh, wow.
Originally, I didn't think I'd go to a school like NYU because we couldn't afford anything like that. And I was going to go to the University of Ohio. Another twist and turn in my life, and I ended up at NYU. They had a special program. We would go for 5 years, get your Bachelor of Arts in one of the sciences. I chose mathematics. And then you get your second degree after the 5th year with your Bachelor of Engineering. And for me, it would have been aeronautical engineering. Well, after 4 years of that, I decided I wanted to go out and work. So I applied to all the aeronautical companies, Cessna, Boeing, Lockheed Martin, Martin Marietta, and a whole slew of them. And they all wanted to make me computer programmers because at that time there wasn't a thing called computer science. And I had taken some programming classes on computers for my math degree, figuring that the slide rule wasn't going to be around very long, right? So in essence, I ended up with what back then was the closest thing to a computer science degree. And computers back in 1969 were kind of just coming into their own. And everybody wanted me to be in one of their computer groups, except for Pratt & Whitney Aircraft. So I decided they were going to make me an analytical engineer. Well, here I am, going to be an engineer. So I decided to take that job. Well, it turned out that they put me in the computer programming group, even though my title was an analytical engineer. Again, a twist and turn in what I thought I was going to do. And I turned out I really loved working with computers and systems, and it had sort of an amazing kind of logical yet creative feel to it. And for an analytical, that was a wonderful way to be creative. That got me connected with Hewlett Packard because I was using HP equipment at Pratt & Whitney Aircraft. I was pushing the state of the art in using some of that technology, which got me a reputation within HP, and that gave me the opportunity to move from the cold of the New England snowstorms into Southern California, where it was sunny and palm trees. So I went to work for Hewlett Packard as a systems engineer, and then came the opportunity to become manager. I hadn't thought about that as part of my career, but hey, I really thought I'd make a good manager. So I got a supervisory position running as a district service manager. I knew nothing about the service business, but the leadership felt that I had really good customer skills and could help the technicians learn how to be more effective in managing customers.
So how many years had passed between, I just want to back up for just a second.
How long this has gone on so far?
Well, I'm thinking about the program at NYU was a 5-year program, but you stopped at 4 years. So you left with a bachelor's degree in mathematics, right? And you went to Pratt & Whitney Aircraft. So you were still sort of aiming towards the aeronautical industry, and yet they kind of moved you more towards the computer systems area. And then as a result, you were working using a lot of Hewlett Packard equipment, and that sort of segued you into a job at Hewlett Packard. So then you were really, at that point, I'm guessing your dreams of being in the aeronautical sphere, let's say, had kind of gone away completely at that point, right?
Yeah. The only connection I had with my dream of becoming a pilot was I got my private pilot's license.
Oh, you did? Okay.
And so that sort of dream was satisfied, and a new dream came on to be a computer whiz.
Okay.
And that lasted, so I was with Pratt & Whitney 4 years. And so in 1973, I joined HP. And within 2 years of HP, my career shifted again from computer whiz to management.
I see. And you were still doing all this with a bachelor's degree.
Yep. I never got my master's at all during my whole career.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. Isn't that interesting?
Well, it's interesting because I think in this day and age, it would be a different scenario, right?
And part of me always kind of felt that there was something missing until I got into my 60s and I realized, nobody really cares whether I had a master's or a doctorate or anything else by that point in time.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, and quite frankly, I'm not sure how important degrees are anymore. I mean, they're still valuable.
Yeah.
But I think the society is shifting a bit away from it. And we can talk about that also. So moving along in my career, so the next thing was now I began to move into the domain of management and organization.
Mm-hmm.
And that really became kind of a passion of mine that I didn't realize I have. And more importantly, it awoke in me the realization that what I really cared about was helping others.
Mm. Hmm.
So I went from wanting to be a pilot, which meant I wanted to, in some form or another, as a youth, the glory of being this macho, basically the big sheriff in town. I was going to fly these planes and shoot everybody that was bad guys. So it was sort of the cowboy fantasy in modern form of many youths, to wanting to become this technical guru.
Yeah.
To really realizing that it really wasn't about all that stuff. It was really about people.
Yeah. That's a big shift. You think about, the sort of engineering mind or the engineering perspective where you're working with, you're focusing on things, so to speak, data and concepts and systems. And you had this opportunity, or somebody recognized in you your ability to work with people, and they gave you the opportunity. You stepped into it, and then you yourself discovered how much you really had that people side.
And there was an interesting kind of overlay between those two aspects of my being. One was, even with the people side, I guess there were two things. One is the desire to understand how we create outcomes in our lives.
Mm.
On a personal basis, there was always this curiosity about how can I create what I want when I want it, right? I think most people really like that, right? They want to create what they want. And from obviously from an organizational point of view, I had goals and objectives that either I set or were given to me by my bosses, and I wanted to be successful. So again, it's how do you create what you want? And so I applied the systems engineering, logical thinking to that question, and began to learn about how limited that really is, and that there were other, some people will call it unlogical or irrational or emotional elements to what we created, which in turn led to my book, The Living Organization, which is really all about how do we create the outcomes we get, and how can we create extraordinary impact.
Yeah.
And the journey really took me deep into lots of different disciplines. I explored not only the theories of management and organization and motivation and all of that, but that led me into, sort of the psychology of it all.
Yeah.
Which led me into, kind of the impact the unconscious that we has, and how do we tap into the unconscious, because that seems to, impact what we create. So that led me to works of people like Carl Jung, and which led me into a lot of the spiritual paths, the Kabbalah and the Taoism and Native American theories. And I just got really curious about everything people were saying about how do we create, how life works, and what our role in it is, and how we can create more of what we want and less of what we don't want. So that's really evolved through this journey that, at the age of 13, wanting to be a pilot, I never thought I'd be on. And I guess part of it is learning to tap into that inner voice that really guides us if we listen.
Yeah.
And we listen by feeling into the opportunities that come along that may make no sense at the time logically, but honoring there's some aspect of ourselves that's giving us guidance.
How do you know that, though? How do you know? Like, how did you know from, when I'm hearing this wisdom coming from you, let's say, this background in math and engineering, and then you're talking about spirituality. but you were in the midst of, corporate America, Hewlett Packard. You were in the midst of a very heady, engineering and systems environment. What made you want to look in those directions? What was in that inner voice, or what other experience were you having within you that got you curious about Carl Jung? How did you even know to look there?
Well, you're right. There was, I think, two influences, or two major domains of influences. One certainly was the external world. You're correct. I grew up in a period of deep curiosity and exploration. I mean, the whole hippie movement, counterculturalism, transcendental meditation, flower children, LSD. I mean, the whole craziness of that period of time. And so the external world opened up, or I should say, created a sense of permission to explore outside the box, for lack of a term, outside the acceptable domain of here's what you learn, and here's how you do it, and this is the path you follow, and all of that.
So you were open to all of those influences, let's say.
Yeah. Well, the outside world sort of offered like I said, the sense of permission to explore.
Mm-hmm.
Right? There wasn't a whole lot of you should do it this way, and you follow the rules. Even though I was raised that way, by the time I got into my 20s, my generation was willing to break out of the box, so to speak. So that was one influence. The other influence was this desire to be successful. Now, that might sound funny, because that might imply that I would follow the rules. But I began, there was always this how should I say, this dynamic tension between my experiences and what I was told.
Oh, say more.
Well, we're raised with, do this, do that, follow this. This is the way the life works. We're given a upbringing, and society has its rules. Our parents have their rules, and we're sort of told this is how life works. But sometimes our experiences don't jive with that. We have an experience that fits something else. And I'll give you one example that comes out of my business experience as a manager.
Yeah.
So, we plan, we're taught the rules of the game is you set your goals, you figure out what you want, where you want to be in X period of time, 1 year, 3 years, 5 years. And you look at where you are now, and you map out a course to get there. You might map out a course. Here I am. This is where I want to go. So I'm going to take step A, B, C, D. Or another planning method is you figure out where you want to be. What do you have to do to get there? What do you have to do before that to get to the next, and so forth? And you kind of back plan it, right? Either method is some form of planning. Well, I had an experience where I was early in my management career. I had set my plan for the coming year. At the end of the year, I sat down to plan for the next year. And the first thing I did was review my goals from last year to see what I accomplished and what I didn't, to learn from that, to figure out what worked, what didn't, so I can apply those learnings to the coming year and to set goals for the future. Well, as I reviewed my previous year's goal, I had an interesting discovery. There was one goal that I had listed that I completely forgot about.
Really?
I had taken no action, no conscious overt action. I had no, initiatives or steps or plans, do A, B, and then C, and then D, and so forth. None of that. And yet I exceeded that goal. Well, how did that happen?
Yeah.
There's an experience I had that was inconsistent with all of the message of how you're successful. I was abundantly successful, and I can't remember doing anything overt to make that happen. So there's an example of what I mean, and I've had a number of those throughout my life in different ways. And that's what kept me exploring, right? These experiences that don't fit the box made me curious about what am I missing. And the more I explored, it's the old saying, the more I learned, the more I knew I didn't know. So I had to explore more, right?
Yeah.
And that's what got me into all these different disciplines. If quantum physics all of a sudden started to define reality different than Newtonian physics, and I began to see patterns in what they were saying to what I was experiencing, then how can I take what I learned in quantum physics to the business world of creating results? If I'm doing a workshop on communications to learn how to be a better manager and a better communicator, and they're talking about concepts like deep connection with somebody to really be active listening, but at a deeper level, that's interesting. So what does this connection at a deeper level have to do with creating results? So that takes me into some of the deeper work of Carl Jung and spirituality and meditation and on and on and on and on. So that's kind of how it evolves. Those were the trigger mechanisms, as you asked, to what got me to this model that I call the living organization, because really what that model is all about is my attempt to, in a different sort of framework, a different logical way of explaining all the theories about how life works and how we could apply it to our lives and especially the lives of business.
Wow. So 15 years at Hewlett Packard, you packed in a lot of learning in there.
Yep.
And then from there you went out on your own as your own business?
1988, I left HP after 15 years and started consulting with companies large and small. A lot of times I take a position as chief operating officer or president or general manager of a company. So I was leading the companies myself. So I was kind of going back and forth between advising CEOs and then being the leader of an organization. And then advising, I had an opportunity to be on a number of nonprofit boards. I began to become the chair of a few of those boards. Then I had an opportunity presented that allowed me to sit on a public company board. I guess I want to take a moment here and answer a question that you asked. How do I know which path to follow? How do I know what that little inner voice is?
Yeah.
At first, it was this, I'd say it was what made me feel good. And what I mean by that is it seemed exciting. It seemed like a good opportunity. Something in me sort of got energetically excited by it. And I'd say, sure, why not? So that was the initial kind of letting my inner voice guide me. It was that sense of there's something juicy about it. There's something that's energizing me when I think about it. Then as life moved on, I became more conscious of that inner voice, and it created a sense of inner calm. Right? When I think about the various alternatives that were in front of me, there was a sense of if I chose A, it would be challenging and fun, but it didn't. It sort of created an inner sense of conflict, or not conflict, but tension or anxiety. If I chose B, it also had that sense of excitement, but it had a sense of calmness to it, an inner peace, like a knowing that this was the right thing.
Yeah, there's a word I usually use for that. I think this is what you're getting at. I say it sort of feels grounded. I feel connected to it.
Yes, that is the feeling. And then as life continued to move on, and I'd hear these little inner voices say something like, I remember one day I was reading a magazine and there was a advertisement for a interfaith seminary. And the inner voice, when I saw the ad, so I wasn't looking for it. I was reading the magazine, and there on the bottom left, right-hand corner was this ad. And my mind glanced at it, and the inner voice instantly said, enroll. Now, what do I mean, I'm fascinated with all things spiritual, but why would I go to a seminary and become ordained? I mean, that makes no sense. But by that time in life, I began to recognize that that voice is meaningful, even if I didn't understand it. Now, I didn't give in right away. I took 3 or 4 days arguing with it, debating with it, asking it why, what's the purpose of it, why does it make sense, why this one, what about the other ones? There were 3 or 4 other that I could have gone to. Actually, I found 12 other interfaith seminaries around the country that I could have attended. In the end, I just took a deep breath and said, okay, fine. You want me to go? I'll go. I don't know why. I'll go to this one because out of all the others, this is the one that popped out of me. 2 pages later was another one. I didn't even notice it was there. So I signed up in 2008 and I went to the seminary 2006, and I was ordained in 2008. Quite honestly, I still don't know why. I mean, I do teach. I do speak at some churches, some new thought churches around town. I do have a small community that invites me in regularly to be the speaker and facilitate conversations and hold classes. I do teach Tai Chi and Qigong, and I kind of use my reverend title for that, but it's on my signature block. My little Rabbi that I have on my signature block, and some people ask me about it, and I tell them what it's all about, and they go, "Wow!" And so I don't know. I don't know why it's there. It was a wonderful experience. I'm glad I did it. I don't know what its meaning is at this point. It may still reveal itself in the future. And that's the funny thing about that inner voice. When I began to trust it and listen to it, things in my life started to flow a lot easier.
Mm. So it sounds like there's a bit of an equation, speaking in mathematical terms for a moment.
Yep.
Listening to this inner voice, which is that part of the equation is to trust the feeling.
Yes.
And yeah, it's okay to question it. And yet it's not necessarily for you to ask why, but to go with the feeling and to trust that it will reveal itself when the time is right.
Yep. Yeah. There is that. In fact, in my model, I call that the context field.
Uh-huh.
So in the desire to understand how we create the world we create for ourselves, and how we can create more of what we want and less of what we don't want, I came up with this model, which I call the living organization. It's summed up by a formula that others have started to call Wolfe's law, and it says that the results we create equals the activity we do times the quality of our relationships squared, combined to the power of context. That's the basic. So, mathematicians have to create formulas. So I created this formula. The point of it is to show the relationship between these 3 fields of energy.
Those are your 3 principles. Is that right?
That's the core 3 principles of the model. Yeah. And the approach I took to understanding how we create outcomes is to recognize that everything is energy. Physics basically tells us that. We tend to think in terms of objects and things and actions and activity as the dominant force in our lives, and that really comes out of the Newtonian physics world, right? Because it's all mechanistic in nature.
Right.
Quantum physics began to change that paradigm when they said, "Wait a minute, there's a bunch of stuff underneath what we see that affects what we see in a big way, and that doesn't follow quite the same rules."
Mm-hmm.
And so I began to ask the question, okay, so what are the major fields of energy that we as humans get to play with, that if we understood how to work with them would be more effective at creating the outcomes we want? And I broke it down into these 3 major fields. One is the activity we do, which is still important. Nobody yet has learned how to sit on a mountaintop and just think reality into existence. It has to do with action and activity and doing. If I want to build a table, I still have to take a saw and cut the wood. I mean, there's still actions to do. But I also recognize that the quality of my relationships, if I feel supported, if I'm connected with other people, if we're in attunement with each other, if we kind of are in sync, or as engineers would call, if the energy waves are in phase, there's a huge amplification of energy. If I got a lot of chaos and turmoil and conflict with my relationships, my activity literally goes down. There's an attenuation of energy. Mm-hmm. And I feel drained and dragged on, and people suck my energy dry, and being around these people are no fun, and blah, 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 blah. That's right. In the extreme. We all have variations on that spectrum between one end and the other. But the more we can get to the end of amplification, where we have people around us that heighten our energy, we accomplish a lot more. The third field of energy is the context field, and this really gets into what we often call the unconscious. And context literally means to give meaning to something.
Yeah.
And how we give meaning to our life is basically through the stories we tell. And that sort of becomes our default operating system. Now, when you think about a machine like a computer, the operating system is defined by the programmer, right? It's externally input into the machine. The designer of the coffee machine designs how it's going to work, whatever. There's an external designer or programmer of it. When you think of living systems like trees or fish or birds or dogs or cats, they have their internal operating system defined by the genetic evolution. Well, people are kind of like living systems because our genetic evolution is, in fact, a key part of what we are, right? We're not birds, we're not fish, we're not trees, we're humans, right? So there's a kind of an evolutionary component to that. But we have a unique capability when it comes to our operating system in that we create stories. And the stories we create have a huge overlay on our genetic coding, our genetic operating system. It becomes the operating system of the operating system. Well, when I began to realize that changed everything. That's why I use, context in the little formula as an exponential function to the other two, because it has that much of an impact. It's our core operating system. It defines how we respond to life. And because we respond to life in a highly efficient way, event happens, I respond with B or with this behavior. And I don't think about it, I just respond. Now that's really cool because I don't have to think about everything, every minute of the day. What should I do? How should I do it? Why? Where? What? That would just be exhausting. I never get anything done. So it's good to have, sort of this core operating system.
So I just want to ask, or I want to offer a layperson's perspective on that for a moment, if I'm getting this right, with that exponential piece of it. So, which distinguishes us as humans from, let's say, other species. So, for example, you hear all the time that, let's say, patients who have a serious illness, that those who have a deep faith or those who have a very positive attitude have, there may be two patients who have the same illness, let's say. Now, they have different genetics and they have different other medical conditions. But the person who has, let's say, a deeper faith or a more positive outlook on life might have a better outcome medically than the person who decides, oh my God, I'm going to die. Has a more negative scenario or narrative in their head.
Absolutely.
So is that what you mean by that kind of exponential piece, the story?
Yeah, that's a good way to describe it. I'll give you a couple of other core examples. CEO client of mine started working with a troubled company, and they were in trouble long enough to where everybody in the organization basically started to believe we were doomed.
Uh-huh.
Right? So that became the collective story, if you will, about the possibility of success. The first thing the CEO did was he sat down with everybody in the organization in a very kind of difficult meeting, as you can imagine. And he said, I've just become the CEO because I really believe in the possibility of this organization. I also understand that you've all been through a lot, and many of you don't feel that there's a chance for success, that we're doomed. So everybody that feels there's no chance for success and that we're doomed and really believes that, I would like to invite you to please leave. Those of you who believe that we can really turn this around and we can move forward, I invite you to stay and engage with me in this vision that I have. Right? So there's an example of a context. We set the context. There's an old saying about, if you think you can, you're right.
Right.
If you think you can't, you're right.
Yeah.
Whatever you believe is reality, that's what's going to happen. So
right.
That's the power of context. I'll give you another example that people don't often think about. Do you know that 30% of all trials that use placebos, the placebo is as effective as the medicine?
Mm-hmm.
That's a huge amount of
that's it. Yeah.
What's a placebo? It's basically the person's inner belief that they had the medicine causes that medicine, that non-medicine to be effective.
Right.
That's another form of context.
Right.
So, yeah, those examples, the ones you mentioned, the two I gave, are really clear examples to me of the power of context. I can even give you one that's a little bit crazy. If you look at the research done on multiple personality disorders, people will actually change their physiology based on which context, i.e., which person they were playing. So people have changed their eye colors. If they're one person, they have brown eyes. If they're another person, they have blue eyes. That's how significant the power of context is. So, that's why I make it exponential, because it is significant. And the beautiful thing about context, if you accept the premise that we create our own stories and therefore set our own context, we can create different stories and create different contexts that are more aligned with what we want to create. And once you accept that, now you've opened the door to a whole series of questions, but also a whole set of possibilities of how we can, in fact, create extraordinary impact in our lives. And do it like I did with that example I said earlier, when I set a goal. Basically, I set a context. I believed in it so much, it happened unconsciously because my context said it has to come true.
Right.
And so without even working at it consciously, it happened beyond my expectations.
Right.
I believe that's why that goal happened. So we can do that.
Wow. It's fascinating. So tell me, your book has been out for a while now.
First of all, I want to caution people that if you're going to pick up on the book and want to do something with it, you're entering into a field called paradigm shifting. It's a whole new way of thinking. It's going to be counter-instinctual. It's going to be like, if you know anything about skiing, you're going to be learning to lean downhill, and everything in your body's going to say, don't lean downhill. You're going to think you're leaning downhill, but you're going to bend at the waist and throw your weight back, right? I mean, it's going to be so counter-instinctual. And I just kind of caution you about that, because it requires a bit of courage to engage this. You got to be willing to lean downhill, even though it's going to feel uncomfortable. We're currently putting together a series of workshops and trainings, we're going to deliver them initially, but eventually we'll train other consultants so we can leverage this into other worlds. And we're also in the process of developing modifications to existing tools, like businesses use the basic concepts of SWOT analysis to do the strategic planning. Well, we're going to modify the SWOT analysis to include not only the activity that we do, but how do you address the strengths and weaknesses of your context and your relationships, given the new strategy you want to create. Remember, any context is good as long as it aligns with what you want to create, because it's going to help you get there. Mm-hmm. If it's misaligned with what you're going to create, it's going to be like swimming across the current of a river. It's going to take you someplace you don't want to go. It's going to fight you, so to speak.
Right.
So the very thing that made you successful may be the thing that causes you to be unsuccessful in the new time and place and strategy you're trying to implement. So we're building tools like SWOT, lean implementation, agile implementation, that incorporates the three fields of energy into the methodologies.
I'm wondering also, I think, in terms of shifting context, we're talking a lot about organizations, but I think a lot of this also applies to individuals as well. How do you shift the context? We're talking about the inner voice. We're talking about how does, it starts with the individual too, right? How do you shift that in your own mind if you're in the midst of trying to make your own individual changes, right?
Yep, absolutely. In fact, it's interesting because all of the principles I applied to organizations really came out of human development. That's why I call the book The Living Organization, because the first shift of paradigm, the first shift of thinking when it comes to organizations is if you think about them as a person. In other words, the whole collective is a single living person. And all of the principles we use for human development apply to organization development. So you can go the other way as well, right? Everything I'm talking about that applies to organizations obviously apply to humans as well. And there's some aspects of the organizations that humans can use in their own life, right? How to put structure in an organization, and how to build relationships that work, and some of those things that organizations have to do. How do you view yourself as a free agent, especially if you're looking at careers? I'm offering somebody my gifts and services. I can look at myself as my business Inc. Whatever my talents are, if I'm an accountant, I'm just an accountant for this person. But it's my business.
Right.
Right. So you can reframe who you are as an individual from an economic point of view, if you want to, as looking at yourself as a individual business. A free agent, and free agency, I think, is becoming more of the norm. The gig economy, everybody's working for themselves, right?
Right.
That's a form of free agency, and everybody's their own business, right? So you can take the principles of business, apply them to the individual. You can take the principles of developing individuals, apply it to the organization. And that's basically what I've done with the Living Organization.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's definitely applicable. There's no doubt about it. So what is the best way for people to find you if they want to explore this further?
Well, my website is www.quantumleaders.com. Make sure you put the S at the end of leaders, otherwise you'll go to a different site. My email is nwolfe, so it's Norman Wolfe, my first initial, my last name, WOLFE. So it's NWOLFE at quantumleaders.com. I'm happy to take direct emails. You can also, on my website, are a whole bunch of blogs we've been posting that talk about all of these from a theoretical or philosophical description of what it is and how it works to practical case studies like how is Amazon a living organization or not, or one of the recent blogs that we wrote. So there's a lot of information out there. They're welcome to. It's all free, obviously.
And we will have all of this in the show notes. And I wanted to also let our listeners know that, Norman, that you have graciously offered a free gift to our listeners.
Yes, I have. They can get that by going to quantumleaders.com/podcast, and they'll get the first 3 chapters of my book for free in a PDF format for them to download and enjoy.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're so very welcome. And again, thank you for the opportunity. I love sharing my passion.
I love listening and learning more about it. It's been great. So thank you so much for being here today.
You're welcome. And again, thank you.
I hope you enjoyed my interview with Norman Wolfe. It was so interesting to speak with him and learn about his professional journey to where he is today. What is your key takeaway from our conversation? Is there something you'll put into action that you'll benefit from for years to come? Share what resonated with you in the show notes at workfromtheinsideout.com. Look for episode 071. That's also where you'll find all the links and resources from today's podcast. If you enjoyed this episode with Norman, please share it with your friends and colleagues, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss next week's show. Remember, subscribing is always free. Are you enjoying the podcast? I'd love to read your review on Apple Podcasts. It's easy to find through my website at www.tammygoularloeb.com/podcast. Just click on the Apple Podcast button and follow the instructions provided there. Thank you so much for listening, and remember, it's never too late or too impossible to increase your sense of fulfillment and satisfaction in your work and other meaningful activities. Let me know how it's going for you. And who knows, maybe you'll be my next interview on this podcast. Bye for now.
Thank you for listening to the Work from the Inside Out podcast. For more information, you can find us at www.workfromtheinsideout.com.